Welcome to video 10. Let's start the first portion of this video talking a little bit more about these numbers here. Why are they relative? Okay, well, they're relative because what they're basically doing is revealing the timing for this gestation period. All right? Which you should understand from the book of Enoch is described until the consummation of their crimes come to the full. Well, that would be that incubation period of that consummation, their crimes now coming to the full, meaning their cup is to the full. This birthing moment, this woman is ready to give birth, but it's going to be in travail. All right? So, as I've said before, and you should really watch the video series, the start date for the Garden of Eden is 36,288 BC. Okay? Watch that on the playlist. If you want to get just to the last portion of the numbers and the math and how it comes together, probably watch the last 3-4 videos of that series. Now, what you should see here is that these are individual stages, or in essence, really cycles of time. Okay, progressive epochs, if you will, that are commonly referred as world age cycles. So what we have here is 1, 2, all the way through 7, the consummation of the seeding of this particular cycle through 7 progressive world ages. All right, and then what I have done is interpreted them against the backdrop of the sexual act of a sperm seeding an egg, or in essence entering into a womb. And then all of this has made absolute total sense in every way imaginable, from many months ago, years ago, what we've talked about on this channel, to what it is coming into the fullness of understanding to what we're talking about right now. So these numbers here are going to basically cover this gestation period and how long it takes. So roughly, each one of these stages is about, at least in world age terms, a little over 5,000 years. Okay, and you should know that from the Mayan world age of 5,125. But what we want to understand is the Hebrew world age, because we're pulling this information from the Bible itself. Let's show you where it comes from. Now, this is going to be a brief summary of this information. I feel that I needed to explain it further because you might not have understood how it reveals the timing of this gestation period, but it's also the timing of their sealing. Because you should also understand that these fallen are being described as being sealed for 70 generations. Okay, in essence, this will be the same thing, the same revelation of what all this means. This is Genesis chapter 4, starting here at verse 23 through to 24. And Lamech said unto his wives, Adah and Zillah, Hear my voice, ye wives of Lamech. Hearken unto my speech, for I have slain a man to my wounding, and a young man to my hurt. If Cain shall be avenged sevenfold, truly Lamech 70 and sevenfold. Now, notice right here at verse 16, everything that is connected to what we understand with this particular land of Nod, where Cain, after he has slain his brother Abel, goes to this land and there finds a wife amongst this people of the Nodites, who is of childbearing years. And we see that there Enoch is born in this land. And you should instantly now make the connection to what I've told you and what we're talking about with the earth being knocked in the past. And you should understand these Nodites are a portion of the descendancy of Nephilim. Okay, that this is already, in essence, taken place. Okay, what you see is the recitation of Genesis 6 has already taken place here before even Abel being murdered by his brother Cain. Which might sound crazy to you guys because you think that there's no people on earth at this time, at least some of you might, except for Adam, Eve, and Cain right now, because he's slain his other brother Abel. Well, in all actuality, the Bible tells you blatantly that there is a land of Nod that has people there. In essence, this is where this woman of childbearing years is, that Cain can take as a wife to bear Enoch. So there you have the Nephilim descendancy already there in place. And then this is who Cain goes to procreate with, that then results in the birth of Enoch, which is in perfect reflection of the Anunnaki, who in essence started this knocking up of the daughters of men, which now ends up in the very name of Enoch being a root of the same action. Okay, and then Enoch, who's the E that's knocking? Well, that would be Enki. It's his deception, it's his plan that he's put in place, of course, you know now, to bring himself into that material form by this descendancy of the Nephilim, now evolved as themselves doing the great work, the Elites, the elites, the Illuminati. Okay, so let's go back here to line 24. If Cain shall be avenged sevenfold, truly Lamech, 70 and sevenfold. Now let's look here, because many people are probably confused at what this really means. I mean, is Cain really being avenged? Because if you really look up the word avenged in reference to how it is being used in this sentence, that's what it's implying, that Cain is going to be avenged. And then if you go right here to this verse, it guarantees that's what it means. And the Lord said unto him, therefore whosoever slayeth Cain, vengeance shall be taken on him sevenfold. So yeah, the murderer in Genesis is being guaranteed to being avenged after a certain portion of time has passed that is relative to 70 and sevenfold. All right? Why would this murderer Cain be avenged? You know? Well, as I said, the Bible's double, and you might not really fully understand what is taking place here in Genesis between line 1 and 2. But nonetheless, to keep this video simple, let's just simply focus on understanding that there is a prediction here in Genesis over a portion of a period of time, which is this 70 and sevenfold period, where we see the descendants of Cain plan on being avenged with vengeance. And then we know that this is that millstone that comes from that wandering place where they have wandered off to, known as Shinar, the dark side of the moon. Revelation 13 verse 13 is that vengeance. Now give me a moment, here comes the train. Okay, now how do we, in essence, crack that code? Not only to find out how long this sealing period is, but to find out when this destruction, this vengeance, is going to be brought about from it. And then at the same time, it gives us the relative timing, the very close timing for that portion of Eden where the temptation was taken. So in essence, dating the Garden of Eden. Okay, now what would be the key mathematical factor? We've got to figure out what this 70 is, what this 70 generations is that will then be times sevenfold. Okay, the key for that was the number 72. The number 72 is the absolute key to unlock this, because it deals with the main factor of relative time, in which all of this is based upon in cycles that would be known as precession. Precession is the key, or the number 72 is the key to unlocking the mystery of precession. And as I said, that's exactly what these, in essence, two symbols here represent together. They represent the cycles of precession that are being born from this chaos of this intruder into our system. And I will. So now we see here in verse 24, if Cain shall be avenged sevenfold. Okay, we had a time outage there. Okay, what I said here is that the key for locking what this 70 generations was using the number of procession. And the number of procession would be 72. Okay? 72 is the key to unlock the understanding of what 70 generations is. Okay? Now, as I said, this is relative with this symbol here, which just incidentally enough begins to look like it's making a freaking Ouroboros as I look at it right now, in which none of this was planned, and there it is. But as I said, this represents the northern ecliptic pole, okay, which is being occupied the constellation of Draco at its very heart. And that this represents the celestial ecliptic pole, which is really the polar axis of our world as it's tilted at 23 degrees, wobbling. It is making this circle in the sky around the heart of Draco in the northern vault of the sky above the northern hemisphere of our world. Okay? And all of that is being played out basically because the Earth has experienced with this solar system an intruder into it that has caused chaos and destruction, in which now we see their whole philosophies are based off of these very calamities of destruction. And I'm hoping that these people are beginning to see that. Just keep watching further. I'm going to explain this as we go further. You will understand what I just said here, if you don't understand it now, by some very important charts and graphs coming up. Okay, so 72. Okay, 72 is it. And how I did it was, what I did is I took 72 times 360, because in essence we're talking about a circle. And what I found, to my surprise, at 72 times 360 was the number 25,920. 25,920. Now, if we're talking about world ages, that should be instantly familiar to everyone who understands anything about that, because we see the great year cycle of the completion of the full zodiac round is 26,000 years, roughly. 26,000 years. The full round of the precessional cycle, known as the Great Year, which is made up of 5 world ages. And on Mayan terms, that's relative to 5,125 years for the duration of a singular world age. Times 5 of those in Mayan terms, we come up to 25,625 years. And this is why you see that they always round the world age, or in essence the great year of 5 world ages, to 26,000. So this is the Mayan relative world age cycle. And of course it begins and ends with serpent destruction. Now, what we find with the Hebrew is very impressive, because you already know by the Hebrew Bible's own account that their ages also begin and end with serpent destruction. The beginning of Genesis, serpent destruction between lines 1 and 2, and then goes forward into Genesis itself with the temptation, the destruction that results from it. And then at the end of Revelation, who is loosed again for more chaos and destruction after that 1,000-year period? Well, that would be Satan, more semblance of the serpent faction. So the world age in Hebraic terms is also beginning and ending with a serpent type cycle, which is now comparative to the Mayan world age, 5,125. Okay, so we see that the Hebrew world age was discovered by taking the magical number of precession being 72, and then timing that times 70 generations to figure this whole thing out. Because if you remember, in Genesis chapter 4, verse 24, if Cain shall be avenged sevenfold, truly Lamech 70 and sevenfold. So understanding what that 70 generations was, the key was precession. And now we see that 70 times 72 brings us to 5,040. Incredible. Almost a perfect match for the Mayan interpretation that have the same theological perspective, the philosophy of the serpent itself, the regenerative act of the serpent eating itself, creating this destruction and chaos, and then the eventual renewal. It's the same. Now, if you want to understand all that in greater terms, watch that video series. Now, what I showed you here was basically study notes for me as I was delivering the information from this portion of the chart. I don't think that I ever really intended for the audience to see these notes. These are in essence notes on the sidebar for me when I did that video series. This portion here in the beginning, 70 times 72 equals 5,040. I showed you how I arrived at that by timesing 72, the number of precession, into a circle of 360 degrees. Very important. That's going to be relative for other things, in essence, with the orbit of Nibiru, okay, which you should understand is 3,600 years. And then we get 360 once again. But we'll talk about that as we move forward, quite possibly later, how that's further relative to the fractal. So, but what does not come out in its consistency is that 5,040 times sevenfold does not equal 36,288 BC. It does under the mathematical perfect, but as I said, these were study notes that I was using. This is something that was relative to the book of Job, that concerns the navel of the earth, and which is why I was trying to remember this exclusive number of the Hebrew world age, and I automatically knew about the mathematical perfect, which gives us now 5,184 times 7, which does equal 36,288 BC. Now, when I read this to you in the last video, I didn't go into that great depth of detail. I just wanted you to watch the video series. But I will at least explain what that really means right here. So what we have are the two separate most popular world ages, at least in perspective now, of serpent destruction and serpent renewal. All right, the Mayan philosophy / theology comparative to the Hebrew / philosophy theology. There they are on either side. So each world age now times 5, because that is the number of world ages that make a great year, which completes the full zodiac round. All right. So basically, you can see that we're almost at 26,000 years, which is what most contemporary people concerned with this information round the great year up to 26,000. Well, discovering this information against the mathematical perfect of the 360 against the 72 concerned with the precession is giving us the true reason why this should be round to 26,000, because what we find, 72 times 360, just so happens to equal 25,920 years. The exact same thing that we see that these world ages themselves are alluding to. All right? So now if we divide the mathematical perfect against this 72, anybody familiar with precession should understand how important that is. Divide 5, as we get 5 equal world ages within it, we end up coming with the mathematical perfect 5,184, thus times sevenfold equals 36,288 BC. Perfectly. All right. So that would be basically circa the relative accuracy, at least concerning these numbers, for the Garden of Eden period concerning the temptation that now results in this gestation period that is covering a cyclic system of world ages till it culminates with this woman in travail. All right, so that's really, in essence, what I was trying to convey to you here. All right, there's always much deeper information. I hope that you at least review that series. All right, so now for some more relative information here. Let's just take about If we're seeing this now, this gestation period, it's coming to 36,288 years. You've got to think about the number that is now personal to Enki in Sumerian terms, which would be 40. And you can see now by rounding this number 36,288 up, okay, we would easily come up with this number 40,000 years, basically, for the sealing period, if you will. Now, once again, there are more years to add on to this dating system here that will bring us closer to 40,000. Okay, so we're not just simply taking it for granted to round it up from 36,288. Actually, there's another outside source that will confirm this same proximity of date, but it's closer to 37,000 plus years, which now brings us closer to rounding to 40,000 years, which you should understand is absolutely relative to Enki, because in essence he has been sealed for that period of time, which now you can see it as the gestation period, in essence when this great work could be completed, in the predictable account of when his great laborers, due to the information, the knowledge that he gave them, to in essence crack the code of 666, the number of the man, the number of the beast, so that he could enter in at this predetermined portion of time in the future. So we get this number for Enki now is relative to 40,000 just by rounding up the gestation period that we know is relative for when the temptation was actually taken in the ancient past. Now let's look at it in a different perspective and show you how it's still going to show you the same things. The number for man is 5. Okay, that's the penta. All you got to do is look out the outstretched form of man within the geometric circle, and that we see that in essence 5 main appendages. You also got to realize that 5 represents the field of choice. It represents the consciousness. It represents the conscious observer of which man became once this life and this breath and this spirit was breathed into him. So man in all actuality at the point of temptation is still in that field of choice. In other words, the 5th dimension. He's already in the daggone thing that he's hoping to obtain now because he's already given it up in the past. And as we see, he goes against the will, goes against the truth of the Father in heaven, and takes this temptation as the, in essence, crooked path to lead him to his perfection. But you know that the shortest point between any two destinations is a straight line. So why are these people traveling a crooked path? In essence, thinking that they're taking a shortcut, when in all actuality, they're going a long way around because they're blind, following blind leaders of the blind. So now that we know that the number for man is 5, relative because he has not yet received at this point his 6th sense properties of enlightenment, if you will. Okay? That is relative to the expression, the cliche saying of somebody being psychic. You know, they got 6 senses. Well, man obviously wasn't psychic at this period because he's trying to still get there, so it makes him still at this point the relative 5. And as you know, 5 times 8 equals 40. Okay, and it's times because it's the crossing of the genetics. It's the X, in which you should also know is relative to everything that we've been talking about, at least in perspective of the seal, even in perspective of chromosomes, in perspective of pyramids, and even in perspective of Osiris, the god of dead, rejuvenation, and resurrection, which is going to become more relative with the symbol X, the hex that's been put upon him, in essence, the sealing period. So who would the number 8 be? Well, 8 is going to be the fallen prince. Okay? And you would see this in reference to, I think, somewhere in Revelation as it describes him being of the 6th, the 7th, and even of the 8th. It's going to have everything to do with from the spiritual abode in which he hails, okay, which exceeds the level of our own cognizance as it's concerned with the number 7. And to understand what I mean there, you would have to view the video series Eternity Explained with a sheet of paper. in which you find that 7 for us becomes the mortal portal of death, where we enter into the spiritual abode, which now would be the relative number of 8, in which we see that this material prince has never experienced, in essence, a material death because he was never in the material form. So the number 7 from our relative perception is not relative to him. He is already in the 8th, hoping to become the 7th, in essence, all by the deception of what we see taking place here. So there's a lot more to say there, guys. I commend anyone that was able to follow me through that, because that means you have been watching these videos for a long time. All right, but that's the gestation period. All right, that's the numbers that's relative in every tangible, variable way that reveals the ceiling. Okay, and then it's going to be hyperfractivated into the circumscribed tetrahedron, in other words, the Star of David, which I refer to as the 6th seal. All right. I think at least at this point, I'm going to go ahead and stop this video here, because that was a lot of information to absorb. View it against the backdrop of these world age cycles as they have been shown in different gestation periods. In other words, a progressive evolution of deception and chaos that finally culminates to this point here. All right. So the numbers, you can view a video series that I did, or at least a playlist titled Check the Numbers, and you'll see some very interesting correlations with the orbital path of Nibiru and the 144,000 of the supposed saved of the 12 tribes of Israel, as it relates back to the number of the 13th, or at least the Baktun in general, which I think, if I'm not mistaken, is 394 years, which should be in days 12 times 12,000 days, which is 144,000 days, which would then interpret to 394 years. Now, I just did all that from memory. I don't have those notes in front of me. If that's not correct, somebody mention it to me on the comments, and I'll produce the information that is. I'll be back.